This episode of Super Pulp Science is brought to you by the Lost Market of Carcosa. The King in Yellow opens his tattered mantle once again on Friday, December 5th, 5 to 9 p.m., and Saturday, December 6th, 11 to 4 p.m. at 318 McDermott.
Attention, citizens. It's time for Super Pulp Science.
This is Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how a genre gets made. I'm going to speak at 1.5 speed because Dan has somewhere to be promptly at 2 o'clock.
Listeners can just set it to 1.5 speed on their own.
So
It doesn't help me at all, though.
that doesn't help you if I
No,
was
it's okay.
faster? No?
What do people use that for?
To listen to podcasts.
This is a
Yeah.
podcast faster.
If you're all crazy, just listen to it as the podcaster intended, as the speaker intended.
Some people talk real slow. So if they're real slow talkers, I'll speed it up. But otherwise, I keep it at 1.
I'm listening to a delightful rendition of Bram Stoker's Dracula again. I like to revisit all my classics, so every once in a while. And the narrator is such a slow talker, but he has like a Christopher Lee style voice. So I'm just letting it roll like the ocean waves across me. I'm here with long-suffering co-host Justin Curry.
We're back.
Yeah,
We're back at
we
the
have
same
bits
time.
together. Well, let's touch here at the podcast.
Ew.
There. Oh, we touched our fingers.
Inappropriate.
Like E.T. Also on the podcast today is my co-conspirator, co-collaborator, sometimes publisher, often punisher, Dr. Jonathan Ball. Thanks for being on the show today. We realized that a couple of things. Number one, Justin and I haven't been in the same room together to record an episode in some time. So now we are. How does it feel? Does it feel any different to any of you who are listening? You probably like it when we're apart.
We always talk about how this time of the year is going to be our slow time of the year.
And then it's a lie.
It never is, because we just fill it up with all the things that we've been holding off.
Yeah, because you tell everyone else, oh, that's my slow time of the year. And so you push things off until then. That's exactly what's been happening to me. And it's been absolutely insane. Did not like it at all the last couple of weeks. But it's actually theoretically slowing down into a proper work cadence. I know I've said that before, but I feel like it's real now. I want to mention that we are celebrating 2 one-year anniversaries, sort of. And I don't want to denigrate fatherhood, but I think ours is as important as you celebrating 1 year.
You be careful.
Being a dad.
Darcy listens to this.
I know,
one.
Darcy.
It'd be 2 for us, I guess, because we would have started this time-ish.
Yeah, but we didn't tell the
3.
dear listener what we're talking about. First, we have to tell them that we made a movie. If we hadn't told you that, we have. We've mentioned it. It's been a year since we went into the cold, hellish landscape of southern Manitoba.
Where was
A
it?
year
Nipple-
since we
Nipple?
wrapped, roughly.
Where were you guys again?
Ninette.
We were in.
Nanette. Yeah, Nanette.
Yeah.
It's been about 2 years since we started, ballpark.
Is that northern?
And a year since we wrapped.
Southern.
Yes, that is southern.
Very southern.
Very southern. Anyway, it was
I
cold.
always think it's
And-
west, but yeah.
We had a screening. And dear listener, I want to say a couple of things about being in Manitoba. When you're in Manitoba and you have a public event and you're wondering if anyone will come, and then the storm clouds gather and then it starts to snow and then everyone shows up anyway, nothing makes your heart fuller than dragging out your friend's family and cast and crew out to the secret screening of your movie. Then every possible excuse was available to them. Weather's bad, right? It's late, it's wet, it's cold. I'm already your friend, so you know I love you, right? All of these things, and yet we filled that Park Theater, and we had a showing of The Princess and the Dragon. And partway through a film that we had seen so many times, I leaned over to Jonathan and I said, I don't know, is this good now? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, I think like people are liking this. People like this movie.
Must be such a different experience seeing it in a theater packed with people versus you guys have been watching it alone for so many
Yeah.
On
nights.
computer screens.
So many different versions.
Screens, different versions, not with a fully balanced sound system, not with the right.
And you know what
coherence.
you do too when you watch it yourself is every time there's a problem or mistake, you pause it and
Yeah.
watch it again.
Yeah,
So you just keep looking at the mistakes over and over again on loop.
100% true. And so to have this uninterrupted showing of the movie, directed by Miles Crossman, we shouldn't take credit as if it was our movie. We just helped Miles make a movie. And I snuck down at the point where this, we don't have a lot of gore in the film. It was originally intended to be more gory than it was in the final cut. But there's one scene where the wound opens. Dan was there.
I was there, yeah.
Dan! Producer
I didn't start
extraordinaire.
snowing until I was already in the building.
You were already there.
Yeah.
That's right. The gory part where she pulls the key from her body through the wound. I snuck down into the crowd sort of so that I could watch the reaction, because it was the one thing where I think it really works. And I had to know from the crowd's faces and the right percentage. I would say about 30% of people legit cringed and like crunched up their face and turned away like, oh, ooh, that is so nasty.
Yeah.
That's the magic of movie making.
It is.
It was so fun. That scene, shooting that scene, we were overjoyed. So like the feeling it created in the audience versus the feeling we had when it actually kind of worked for us. It was so interesting to juxtapose those two feelings.
Then you guys did like a Q&A afterwards, like you guys got up on the stage and
Yeah, and
talked about the film.
I interviewed a number of the actors and producers and writers of the film. Yeah. No, Dan was there. He's like an embedded journalist. You could tell us what it was really like. Yeah.
Well, I had to leave. I couldn't stay for the Q&A, unfortunately. But what I will say is I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was scary. That's the main issue. The main thing you're going for is to be scared or to convey fear. And I got that. It's a very interesting story. I like the story. I think it was good. It's a very apparently a low budget film. Like it's not like you're not pretending it's something it's not. But I could see how this could be scaled up to be like, you can see like where you could put like more gore and more of this and then that kind of stuff. With more money, you could see that it could be more. But I think with what you guys had, it was very well made.
Like an Evil Dead situation where the
Yeah.
first film was shoestring budget,
Yeah.
maybe.
There's got to
Would you do it again with a bigger budget now that you've gone through it?
It's funny you say that because that is a discussion. That's what everyone wants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That's like legitimately what you'd want is for a distributor to take it on, really love it. It do well enough on streaming to warrant a slightly larger budget, even a slightly larger budget. We could do so much more with.
Mhm.
And then you'd either remake it or you'd sequelize it. The essential premise of it means you could easily recast the entire thing and redo the entire thing. It's not, would you agree with that, Jonathan? It's not married to any one performance, really.
It depends.
It's like a concept, kind of like Saw.
Yes, is the short answer. It depends on what you're talking about, right? Like, so there is other versions of it in a technical sense that like we wrote another version of
That's
it
true.
that you could do instead.
Yeah.
There's another version of this one you could do instead.
Yeah.
You could scale up the backgrounded elements, like the Midas Institute elements that are very much in the background, like
Scale
the
them
back
or
story,
scale them out entirely.
or scale them out and make it more of a focus on, so there's lots of ways to approach the material because it's a film where you have a lot in the background, both in the technical, literal sense, like there's a poster on the wall in the background, and also like the idea story sense of like what this institute is sort of not really dealt with fully.
That's
You just
right.
get hints of
Yeah.
it. So all that stuff could be scaled up if you had money. All that stuff could be taken out if you wanted to focus it in a different direction. You got lots of options. You can make it more sci-fi than it is. You can make it more horror, gore than it is.
I'm making arrangements to have Eric, one of our big producers, and Miles both on the show to explain their parts, how it worked. What we never
Right.
have ever put on the record the parts of it. We've been crediting Miles with the rewrite, but Eric and Miles sat down to rewrite a whole bunch of the script. So I want to get him on to talk about which parts that we've gone on records to say that there were changes that Jonathan and I didn't like as writers, but we were fine with as producers. I would love to triangulate, like, who's to blame for the parts I didn't like.
Okay, how's that feel? Great. Nicole?
Good.
Wolf, any thoughts?
No.
I have a thought. What if Damien had an eye patch like Wolf? Huh. Let me think about that one, Chad. All right, you're the genius.
I was thinking about this a lot because we've been going through the process of putting together our, little book-related project connected to it. And one of the things I've been thinking about, but looking back at our original script version of it, and then you think about like the elements that they changed and added and so on. And I realized more and more, like as I was looking at our script, that they didn't really have a choice. They had to change a bunch of these elements, not because our script wouldn't have worked, but because of the method we wrote the script in. Like if you go back and look at the Alien scripts, like I'm just talking about the movie Alien now. So if you look at the scripts, there's a script path where Dan O'Bannon has his script. And if you read it, it reads like a normal script. And then that's not the script though that they shot, right? They shot a script by Shusett and Paget, if I recall the names correctly, where these producer writers had come in and they had rewritten O'Bannon's script. And when they rewrote it, they wrote it in a very stripped down, very technical, very minimalist sense, because they were thinking like we were thinking, here's a script that you can just shoot. So their script is like, she turns to the left, she walks 3 feet, she turns to the right, she moves her head this one way. And like, it's very technical, it's very precise, it's very short.
And if I dare say, it does the thing that often screenwriting books will tell you absolutely don't do, which is give direction.
It gives tons of direction, and it's great. Yeah. It is the movie Alien. But at the same time, it's really very much like a director-producer team, writing a script and taking it away from the original writer. And we almost were doing that in a weird sort of way. It's not the same thing because we were the original story writers who were being adapted.
Yeah.
But the way that script, that in retrospect, the way you and I had put that script together, Miles kind of had to take it away.
No, totally agree. Because you got to make it your thing.
It couldn't have been, like, if he had done the script how we did it, it wouldn't have been his movie. He would have had to shoot it the way we said to shoot it, because otherwise the script doesn't work.
And he has a much more and he'll come on and say so, I'm sure, much more intimate knowledge of the space itself. He had walked the ground so often, he had walked the building so often that he had cast and shot a version of the film in his mind's eye already, and so he was trying to adapt those scenes.
And this happens with like every project that has to change mediums, right? You're going from the written page to now shooting it.
We had done
life.
that, so you're right. But the problem I think that kind of became our frustration is we were like, well, we've already done all that. Why is he adding more adaptation? Right. For a little while, we very quickly were like, okay, well, if that's what he wants to do, we'll just support him doing it that way. But the things where we were getting hung up on originally, in retrospect, I'd think back, looking at the script, I'm like, well, he had to change these things or he wouldn't have had anything to do.
Dear listener, an important thing to talk about when we are talking fast and loose about the stuff we didn't like or the stuff we did like or whatever, it's because the team came together in the end and we all agreed on what it was we were going to make and who was in charge, which was Miles, and that was fine. Leading up to that, there was a literal time in the studio where I sat down at my desk and I looked at Jonathan and I said, okay, I'm going to set a timer, and for a couple hours, we can bitch about any changes that were made in the script and think if we can improve it in some way. And then when the time was up, we're like, okay, we can't substantively improve it in a way that brings it back around to our original idea. So the idea is now different. How do we support this different version?
Yeah.
Right. And that is an important part. A lot of my
you guys had like a little killing your darlings session.
Yeah. And a lot of the creative world is really, I mean, I've said it many times, you don't eliminate, you transmute, right? Rather than be so upset that it's different, you just say, well, it's not gone. It's just changed into this and it's changed into this. And if you can, I think, and I know this sounds, almost trite, but if you can just let the part of you go that fought for that and just say, okay, bye, right? And let them leave. And then it's okay. That person left and now it's this. And so you just go for it.
I think you had at one point in the production, there was a sort of a thing, what a conflict that had happened. And I remember at one point you had kind of taken somebody aside and you had said, like, they were complaining about, I'm not used to working this way. I'm used to kind of it being more collaborative and more, this and that. Everyone's got ideas, but here it's so top down. And you had said, but you're in the army now. Like, this is a hierarchical command. Like, that's how a film set works.
I did say that because I tried to be a force on set, to hear people's complaints, to hear people's like wishes. Like, independent film is a high stress environment, and just try to be a soft landing for a lot of people. I tried to do that, and so as a result, somebody who was used to more collaboration, more, why don't you hear my point of view? Someone who had come more from theater background and was used to that in sticking the landing was saying to me, how come our voices aren't being heard? And I was like, the time for that is over. We're in combat now. We just got to listen and go.
But I think that mentality, it's got good and bad sides of it, but it is what you have to do at a certain point in film. And I think one thing that served us well, one thing that served the whole project well, I think, was, you and I did kind of approach it in that way of like, okay, if Eric and Miles had made a change to the story, we would be like, okay, we don't like that change for these reasons. And we'd like present the reasons, we'd present our ideas. And then if they came back and said, well, we want to do it this way, we would just stop arguing about it. Okay, well, they outrank us.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, now we're in line with your idea, even if it's not our idea.
Yeah. And
then we could move on to the next thing.
What I would do on the day, in the moment, is I would ask them to restate their idea, because obviously if I didn't agree with it, I needed it restated so that I knew I understood.
And you could explain
my version.
Else.
Then I would make a note of how I had restated their idea that they had agreed to. And that is what I would say to other people. This is what we're doing. And I would read it literally from the board. We called it the clipboard. We had team clipboard. And if it went on the clipboard, it was law. Right? And there was no room on the clipboard to argue about.
Well, you credited as clipboard something or other in the credits.
In there.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what had happened was
exactly.
we had, through hook and by crook, one of the producers that was going to be first AD, he had a lot going on in his life, and it remains a lot going on in his life, which is his story to tell and not mine. And that's why I hope he'll come on here. But in the interest of saying, okay, someone has to do a bunch of this stuff, we're just going to form sort of a secret committee, not that secret, and we'll just take that. And actually, this is a great place, Jonathan, in front of you, Justin, and you, Dan. It's important that I say this, Jonathan, that at one point...
Am I in the hot seat?
No, you're not in the hot seat. This is me admitting how I passed a terrible buck down to you while we were on set, which someone turned and said, oh my God, our continuity is all falling apart. Gregory, you got to get all the continuity organized. And I went to myself, I am the wrong person. But I said in the moment, absolutely, because you're the only person representing that department, and that's your job, your department's job, to get that together. Absolutely, we will get continuity sorted before our next meeting of the minds. And I walked downstairs and I handed Jonathan the script, and I said, we need all the continuity organized in shooting order. And he just looked at me and said, okay. And sat down and started doing it. And I actually felt like I had committed a crime.
You were so worried about Danny, Mom. What about...
That's a cut.
Sorry, I had to cut. Les, your boom's all over my frame.
Yo, I asked for a frame line.
Okay. Can we get a frame line, please? Les, do you have a frame line?
I think so.
Just to clarify for people what that means when he's talking about continuity. So if you don't know how films work or film sets work, even if you do know, you might not necessarily be thinking it through. So, of course, if you've got like a film that has, say, 10 scenes, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And that's the order of the scenes, the order they happen in the movie. And maybe that's even the chronological order, let's call it, is the time order. So that's a simple version of how like a film might be structured. Well, you're not going to shoot things in that order. So if she gets a knife in scene 2, and then in scene 4 she loses the knife, you could be shooting like scene 8, 3, 5, 7 in that order. And the question becomes, like, at any moment, like,
What's she wearing?
What's she wearing?
Where's the knife?
Where's the knife? Does she have a knife? Does she not have a knife? Like, it's very, and then if they start to move those scenes around because like the schedule's not working, they got to reshoot part of it, or maybe they got to split this 2 into 3. There's all sorts of weird things that can happen.
Things you can't plan for.
Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is pretty famous for its continuity errors.
Yeah.
There's always continuity errors.
I have a friend who just makes a TikTok account just by pointing them out.
Yeah,
That's all she does.
I can believe that. However, is it Raimi? It's Raimi, and also I think Spielberg too. Both credited their editors.
Oh yeah.
With the fact that they have given the editor the power to choose a continuity error, like just leave it in if the performance emotion is strongest.
Yeah.
Like that is the at that
important.
level.
And that's the right
At that level.
approach.
Yeah.
It has to be pretty blatant for the normal person to
Even here.
notice.
You have to see it twice. Oh my God, amazing.
Well, some you see once. So like there's a famous example in Game of Thrones where they had a Starbucks cup.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they had to re-edit that for reruns and things. But you want to avoid that kind of thing, right? You want to avoid
That's not continuity.
that is
something else.
continuity.
Apparently, there's a naked guy in the background of Twister, also in.
I saw that recently. Yeah, in the cornfield or something like that.
Which I believe someone is just gaslighting me. I think they put that in that video, but
Yeah, it may not seem like continuity because you're like, oh well, there was
Isn't that just
Starbucks
a blatant mistake?
It's a mistake, but the mistake is the continuity mistake of the background has changed. So like on a technical level, the background has changed. They hadn't reset the set properly.
I think in
blah, blah,
Conan the
blah.
Destroyer, you can see a pickup truck go by in one of them in the mountain, like behind them. Yeah, and there's stuff like that.
So like stuff that happens, and it just is what it is. It doesn't always ruin things, but you obviously want to minimize it and avoid it. And you just have the simple problem of like, well, you can't just have her costume changing from shot to shot, scene to scene.
You have actually completely justified why you were the one to give it to, because you.
It's a nightmare job.
Yeah, it was a nightmare job. And I want to say, in the freezing cold, watching Jonathan just sit down with the script, take a notepad, and just start doing the craziest algebra for a while on that notepad was so, I felt so guilty.
Here's the other problem.
Because I had said to the person, I will solve it. And then you jumped in and was solved it.
But here's the other problem.
Jonathan.
Here's the other.
We were on an indie set where
it's
you
not
the garbage.
It's not even as simple as I just made it sound. Because let's say you're shooting scene 3 and she has a knife in scene 3. Well, and in scene 4 she also has a knife, and scene 5 she loses the knife. Well, what if they, while they're shooting scene 3, change the script? Yeah. And now she puts the knife in her pocket. Well, all of a sudden the script now has to be redone, and then everything else in the script has to be rewritten, basically in line with the continuity
just
change.
a note that if you're going to reintroduce the knife in this scene now, she has to
pull it out of her
be
pocket.
seen pulling it out of her pocket.
But
You
you already
need that
shot
shot.
scene
Right.
where she didn't pull it out of
That's
her
right.
pocket.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can fix it. Sometimes you can be like, okay, well, we have a continuity problem, so we just need to pick up a shot where she takes it out of her pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had this sequence where in the movie that you watched, she goes in, she's following the clue path, and she ends up in the furnace and then finds the page and then goes and faces the dragon in his den. Well, how it was written, how it was shot, and the continuity of the film was that she faces off the dragon and then comes out through the furnace room.
Oh.
So with some fanciful editing on Miles's part, he reorganized the order of that. And it all came down to the fact that she was too calm after the encounter with the dragon that it just didn't ring true that she would now stop and solve this puzzle. And so there was a little bit of franticness in it. So instead, let's put it before she encounters him, and then there's an emotional rise.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, that change in medium. On the page, in your mind, it makes sense. But when you see it...
Or sometimes things go wrong. We had a moment where she stabs at the dragon with a knife, and it's supposed to, like, anyway, what happens is the knife broke, like, in the shot.
Was it supposed to break?
No.
Okay.
But it was great. It looked great. So it's like, okay, well, that's what it is now.
Yeah.
Well, now we have to redo the script. You know what I mean? Like, because you have to track all that stuff. And then, because, again, you're doing everything in order. It's too much stuff going on. You're just losing track really fast. You will still at some point create a continuity problem, either because you just messed something up, or just it never got thought of, or the editor creates a continuity problem because of some reason. But you just want to try to minimize it as much as possible.
Important to say, we are not film experts. We're not filmmaking experts.
But you've made a film.
Well, yeah, and a few. We did a bunch of. I've worked on a lot of shorts.
Oh, yeah.
And I featured before this, and but I don't consider myself good at it.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is why I was saying, like, I felt guilt in that I'm sort of took over the responsibility of being head of the department, and in my mind, don't say yes to anything you can't do yourself, because there are so many moving parts in this crazy moment that you're the one that has to do it. And so the fact that I, on a whim, was like, Jonathan, I'll make Jonathan do it. And then he said, yes. This is because if pressed, I could not have done it at the level of care and consideration that the team could. And you have to, in a big project, you're on a team.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that you're on the team.
Switching gears here to I like this continuity discussion.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of bring it to, you guys are all writers. We've all worked on projects. And, in your mind, you're like, you should start at the beginning and end at the end.
That's not how I
As
think.
we know, that's not how it works, right? And for the fledgling artist, graphic novelist, writer out there, can we discuss for a bit, if there's a current project or a past project where, how that timeline came together, starting at the end and going back to the beginning?
Like, as far as what the story would be, I can say with certainty that The Princess and the Dragon began with an idea that started at the end.
The twist at the end?
I knew the twist before I knew. And in the original novella, it's a man in a princess costume and a woman in the dragon outfit. And because in prose, you can do that kind of trick because you can't hear anybody, right? Then it would be kind of an interesting reveal that the gender swap, and we play around with pronouns in the story because it's makes it more confusing and kind of a little bit more mental. And then when it's revealed, it's actually because it makes more sense that way.
And also in the
Can't do
story,
that in film.
And by the time I got involved and we were writing the story, I had been reading a lot of Harlan Ellison. And so Harlan Ellison, as particularly there's this great Harlan Ellison story called Repent Harlequins to the TikTok Man. And this it has this breakneck kind of style and this kind of surrealistic approach that he takes and so on. So, once you get in, you have these stylistic choices you have in, prose that you don't have in film. And then even when we were doing the film adaptation, we were building surrealistic imagery into it. So one of the things that isn't in the final film, but was in our script version, is the actual place we filmed. There were two buildings that were basically mirrors of each other. Basically they were
in
the same
the architecture, they were the same building twice, sort of.
Same building twice, but one was more ruined.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we wrote I remember at one point I wrote into the script, we're in this hallway and she was tied to a chair in our script, not waking up in the room, but locked in the room, but tied to a chair in a hallway with this person advancing on her. And at one point it just cuts and she's in the other hallway. We just so we were playing around with that. Now, eventually we determined, one, they toned down the surrealistic aspects of our script, but two, they determined it was too dangerous to film in that building.
Right.
Right. And so you get changes that start to happen
But
because
to Justin's point, the image came before where it would even fit. It was wouldn't it be cool if, because we have these two places and you could cut on a lockdown shot between them and they would match, but one would look like 20 more years of rot had happened. You'd never be able to pay for that. That would be
There's
too
a term for that too, shooting the rodeo or something. If you suddenly have access to this spectacle or this something on your shooting, you shoot it and you find a way to mix it in.
This reminds me of, I think, did I mention this last week? Tammy and the T-Rex? Or when did I?
We were talking about it, but I don't think it was
They had 24 hours or 48 hours with that animatronic T-Rex.
Yes.
And so let's shoot a movie.
Let's figure out a movie and shoot around that. And that's what they did. And they did their best.
Cut! That's a cut. Nick, comments.
Yeah, just a couple. Okay, that was good. Tito, that was good, man, really. You didn't feel like laughing?
I laughed.
Oh, okay, I guess I missed it. You can make it bigger, all right?
our script has a bunch of B-roll instructions, like shoot this wall, shoot this picture on the wall, shoot this, thing that's written on the wall. No, because of course it didn't matter to the story. We had worked it in as part of a symbolic language, but then, it didn't necessarily make sense.
Think about it in, again, talking about story structure. So in film language, just if you talk really simply like a television episode, there's an A story and a B story. And in order to allow you to keep elevating the A, you cut to the B to like relieve tension or whatever it is, the side story. So our B story in our original script cut to all of this detritus. Right.
Even that too, you don't need most of the crew for that.
That's right.
You need one camera guy.
Exactly what
he can go do all those establishing shots, all those like little B-roll things. You don't need any actor or actresses for it.
Our original idea was to hire just a student filmmaker to go shoot a whole bunch of, be just a second camera operator to go gather all that.
And if you're doing like
story
syndicate, if you're doing like a television show, you can. Yeah. You're reusing those shots every episode.
But also it's an aesthetic choice because the way we wrote the script, like you would have the room for if you were slow on time, like if you had only 80 minutes and you wanted 90 minutes, you would have the room to do things like just show 30 seconds of an empty hallway.
Or like,
and that would work in our script, but it wouldn't work in the final film as Miles had envisioned doing things. So much stuff shifts and changes, but we were very good, I thought, about to pay us a compliment. I thought we were very good about like, once it was established, like, okay, we're not going to be doing this thing because Miles doesn't want to go in that direction. Eric doesn't want to go in that direction.
Oh yeah,
they're in charge.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, well, now we're done with that. We're not going to argue about it anymore. It's we're just on the same page because ultimately we were all aligned properly. I felt in the sense of like supporting the vision of the director and so on.
So in this specific example, in the story and in the film, we had the ending first and then built towards the twist. But rarely do I do that.
I forgot it was a twist.
Yeah, right.
Because by the time that comes out, they were mentioned this. It got reviewed in Rue Morgue. It got a nice positive review, and at one point they mentioned the twist ending, and I was like, "Is it a twist ending?" And then I realized, "Oh yeah, it's supposed to be a twist." And I just
you guys
it so many times. I've lived with that ending.
It was never a twist for you guys. Yeah, that was the first thing you knew.
Yeah, but it was
originally the idea, like you were saying. It started with this idea of like this twist ending, and then like that's really built into the story. Is like it's all culminating in this twist. And even our script is kind of moving that direction, but it started to get less twisty the more we worked with it. And then Miles started to think of it as a twist again. But by that point, I'm like, I've seen it 800 times. Like, I'm not thinking of it like a twist.
I remembered it a split second before it happened on the screen. I remember it was, you had told me at some point what it was. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is the part where this happened. And and then it happened. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. So just happened to remember it, but it's very good. It's a good twist. I like it.
But in prose, I'll often have, when you're writing stories, I don't know if it's like this, because Meat House has your twist.
Yeah.
And so you're building towards the twist. You know the ending. But if I'm writing a prose story, I don't like to know the ending usually before I start. Or if I start, just thinking through my own process now, because I'm working on a project right now. If I start at what I think is the end, I usually end up writing on both sides of it. And it becomes
usually
middle.
changes.
It almost becomes the important
or the conflict
twist in the middle, the conflict in the middle.
I find it's kind of nice with, especially in graphic novels right now, like the book I'm working on, there's just a certain scenes that are very clear in my head. And like they're like in the third act, I just know exactly what's happening there. Yeah. And there's some muddy parts in like what leads up to it and what happens right after. But once you kind of flesh out that one scene, then you kind of know what happens before and after, right? Like, so you don't have to stress out and just like hammer away at those scenes that you don't have figured out yet. If you could figure out what happens after and before it, they kind of inform each other.
Or you find out they're not necessary.
Yeah. How do you feel about the certainty of that when you're working in graphic novels, because you and I both do that, there's a certainty that comes from knowing this visual will clearly establish exactly what I mean. I struggle sometimes in prose where it's like, oh, is that prose too purple? Am I mixing my metaphor? Do they know I'm being literal? This is really what I mean. Whereas if I get to work in graphic novels, I can show the thing I meant to be happening. And even if it's something like The Eye Collector where it's dreamlike, you saw it. You can't deny that thing happened because you saw it. It's not in your imagination. It's now on the page for a moment. Do you find that that's helpful to you, knowing that in your graphic novel there's only so many pages? And those pages will contain pictures that will also establish what you really mean.
Yeah, and I think like with how I do it is can the visuals take away from the words, right? Like if you've written out the script and you have the character saying some stuff, and then you draw, it's like, oh, I don't have to have them say that anymore because the pictures do the lifting. I don't have to have the words to accompany it. So I think that's usually where my mind is going, is how can I make this less wordy and more of a visual story? But did you guys find that as well with the film, that some dialogue got to be cut because the visuals could do that lifting?
We wrote no dialogue. Like there was like 10 lines of dialogue, 20 lines. There's not a lot of. We ended up adding more dialogue later.
Interestingly, there's a moment where Nadine, who was our principal actress, she had flagged all of these points of dialogue, and she, as a sort of fun aside, said, I played a game with myself. Could I tell when Jonathan and Gregory were writing, and could I tell when Miles and Eric were rewriting? And she was about 85-90% accurate, where she could tell the themes underneath, what it was we were trying to say and what she was bringing to the performance. And I thought that was a really interesting, I wouldn't have believed, I guess what I'm saying, I wouldn't have believed that was possible to do.
What were the big differences?
With the face. To me, it's strange.
Yeah.
I can't really tell.
It's often tonal stuff. But one of the things that was weird about it was when you got to keep in mind in this example, though, normally for me, writing is like you're talking about. You have a bunch of words and you start taking them out as like visuals come in or art comes in for comics or whatever. I'm always my joke with Lyndon, the letterer, here is like it should be fewer words. Less words. There's too much words. Let's get no words. But
letterers are still paid if the words are removed, dear listener.
But one of the things,
not a way for him to race
no
to a lesser invoice.
But the thing that we were doing differently in this script was, so first off, in the actual story, there's, I would say, 10 lines of dialogue, maybe in the whole story that we're basing it on.
Yeah.
And then in the script, we didn't know who was going to be acting in it. Will we be able to get a person who can act? We don't know. So we're trying to write so minimal dialogue.
I just want to expand something there. One decision that was made was we're making this movie in this time for this money, no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So therefore, one of the decisions was, okay, well, if the characters are in masks, the assumption is, and again, it hadn't been cast yet, none of that had been happened, but the assumption was you're not necessarily going to get people who have a lot of experience acting. And so don't overburden them with lines and deliveries that are only something that you would expect from a nuanced, careful, experienced actor. We instead tried to, in our original version, drive it with action so there would be more chance for a person with not very much experience to react to the situation rather than have to bring all this
And in
pathos.
fact, we wrote it in such a way, I don't remember this, but we wrote it in such a way that they're in masks, they're almost saying nothing, and anything they do say could be recorded by a separate actor later. So we don't have to, right? So all we worry about, if you can get a person who can act, great. But if you can't get a person who can act, just get a person who can physically do what is required of the script. They're in a mask anyway. They don't need to act, really, on that facial level. They don't need to necessarily say anything. You could just splice the dialogue in later.
Just so you understand at what level we were originally operating at, there was a realistic discussion wherein I said no at every turn, where they tried to cast me as Dr. Storyline.
Ah, that would have been awesome.
No. Because did you see when
he was very good, though. I like the actor that played Dr. Storybook. Right? Very good.
And that's a man that looked in his eyes was the pain that he thought he was taking away, that he was definitely going to give back.
Okay.
I couldn't have done that at all.
Good.
There's no way.
But, so anyway, by the time you shoot the script, by the time they take the script away from us and they're like going to rewrite the script, now they've got people in their heads as possible actors. Now they've got the idea that they need this, they need that. They got more, they're adding characters, they're adding dialogue, they're adding, scenes that have talking. We hadn't really written hardly, we had the bare minimum of that kind of thing for practical reasons, but also just a tonal reason. We're prioritizing imagery over dialogue, for example. Although we did write some of that dialogue.
Yeah. And when we were originally having the back and forth as writers to say, oh, but what about this and what about this? Miles would often say, no, we're not making that kind of movie. That's not the kind of movie I'm trying to make. And so he had already decided the kind of movie he was going to bring on top of this as a stepping stone to what he was going to do. And so then there's no point in fighting for a movie that isn't going to be made.
What do you think?
It should be handheld.
No, I think it's better on the dolly.
Nick, do I see him?
No, you just see the apple.
But then you'll fast forward to, you actually shoot the thing. You end up making a decision in the process that the mask is going to, so he had a visual language thing where like the mask is going to start coming apart. It's going to eventually come off. Right. So that starts to change, everything. Now there's
messed up our continuity. So
it becomes a continuity issue, but it also is like, you got more opportunity to see their face. You got more opportunity to say words, and so on. By the time we pieced the film together, we then went in, and we helped Miles write dialogue and voiceover narration that comes from the storybook character and
all the storybook stuff, all those prompts and things I wrote after.
That storybook wasn't in our original script.
Okay.
It was something that Gregory added to the
Door eliminates transmute. It's like, if we need a storybook, then I'll make a storybook. And if you're going to make a storybook, well, it's got to rhyme.
You have to name the character Dr. Storybook.
That's right.
Well, that was originally. We called him the book in the story. Thing. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that kind of gets added in where like we kind of end up writing more dialogue for Miles's and Eric's script than we ever did in our own script, which is weird
because you didn't need dialogue in your version, right?
Yeah, it was a liability in our version.
That's interesting. I can tell you one of my favorite lines in it was when she meets Dr. Storybook and he says, "My name is Dr. Storybook," and she's like, "Is that your real name?" And he's like, "Of course not."
Yeah, I think you wrote that line. A lot of the storybook scene we mostly wrote in the original draft, but almost every other scene where people talked to one another wasn't in our draft.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
can I ask?
Because that was the first scene in our script.
Okay. There's a lot of your style in this. Like it really felt like a G&B Kmitrek movie to me because of all the posters and all the
we started to shove a lot
stuff.
Of it in.
And I think it's kind of cool because that's something you came up with a long time ago, the Minus Institute, right? Yeah. And you've had comics for this thing and
comics and
all kinds of posters
and a whole world built.
Now you're bringing the Minus Institute to the real world.
This is technically the second time it's appeared in film. Also,
okay,
because we did a short film, Not of This Earth, which is a Minus Institute. It's like a Minus Institute like job interview movie.
Okay.
Where the person's head explodes.
12 feet from where you're sitting right now.
Yeah, there's some red on this ceiling, I think, from it. But that was kind of what you're talking about, which was shoot the rodeo.
Yeah.
It was, okay, well, we have this place. We have to decorate it to look like something. And that's when I said, well, then let's take all of this already designed elements and just use it. And
because you're trying to add production value.
Yeah.
So that's the thing you got to really understand when you're in indie space is you just want, you don't have the money to do everything you want, and you don't have the money to do everything you'd like to do, but you just have to figure out, what do I have that would add production value? So what you're trying to do constantly in indie filmmaking is make it seem like you have more money than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying to,
it's just a little bit,
even if it's just a little bit. So you're trying to figure out, like, how do I make it look like $1 million, even if I only have $50,000? And it's very much the shoot the rodeo mentality. You got to figure out, well, what do I have access to, like a building in this case, or a vehicle, or some object, or whatever. And one of the things we had access to was Gregory's artwork. And it's like, well, you can't just shove every artwork thing in the background. It's got to have some logic or reason. But we had enough of this Mises. It made sense to tie the Mises stuff to it. You could have then a post in the background that would kind of comment on the themes of what's going on.
And we can never say it in this film. But
did you keep any of those posters that were on-screen posters?
Yes, I have a few of them. I gave a bunch to the production people on the last day. We just said, you can take some of it as a memento, but some of it I kept. Yeah, and it's cool. I have this one. I have the torn poster that she smashes.
Oh, yeah.
And finds the clue page behind the Open Your Mind. Having that scrap of poster in my workshop at home is like a cool thing to just look at and know that
on-screen art.
Was, in a movie.
Very cool.
What's interesting about that from a standpoint of, dear listener, if you're trying to get some of your ideas somewhere, use everything you got. And if you are in control of it, it's sometimes as easy as simply in writing say, you can use all of this, but it doesn't belong to you. Right? And for the purposes of the film, you're free to use all of it to promote the film, in the film, but all of the copyrights and all of the content belongs to me outside of that use.
So let's imagine it was a Hollywood big budget film.
There'd be no way we could do that.
No, but let's imagine we did. Let's imagine it's a Hollywood big budget film. They say, Gregory, you're coming on board to do this film. We're going to have you make a bunch of posters. Film's going to own the posters. They'll be on screen. How much would that cost the production? Like, how much would you bill?
Like, how much would I have charged? I would have charged them $30,000-$40,000 for that amount.
So almost the whole cash amount, like in the budget, just to have those posters in the background.
Yeah.
But instead, I just said, yeah, you can use them as.
But it looks like, and it adds to the production value.
Yeah.
Right. Like it adds to the on-screen production value, like $50,000, $30,000 worth of production value.
People think they were commissioned just for that film.
That's right.
Meanwhile, you've been working on them for decades.
For a long time, and just dripping on it. And it's, again, one of those ideas where I didn't think it was for anyone but me. And people kept saying, oh, I like this one. So I'd add another one and just expand the world. But with the Minus Institute in particular, if a fan said, you know what would be cool is a poster like this, I would legitimately design the opposite idea. Right? Because like I can't have it be influenced in that way. And so that's resulted in this sort of weird mess. Now, what will it mean in the long run? Is there a legal mess ahead for us? We're about to find out.
This film, where is it in its life cycle?
It is being reviewed by festivals in its life cycle right now. And if it is shown in festivals,
distribution deal.
It has a distribution deal, which is how you get into a number of those festivals. The distributor sends it.
And what is the distribution deal?
The distribution deal is for Miles and Eric to talk about on that future episode.
Yeah.
Only because a couple of different times I asked, am I allowed to say this or that? They said yes. And then a day later said, no. So
the point is simply that it has a company who has agreed to distribute it.
Okay.
It's how to put into those festivals.
And how they distribute it, we'll see how they choose to do so. But
will it
theoretically,
streaming? Yes.
That's what I want to get. Yeah.
Streaming will it be on?
Not
We'll
sure
tell
yet.
you.
To be determined.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if we
To
may
be
know
determined.
Because it changed. We know what they're saying now.
Yeah, but that will change.
Yeah.
And will change, right?
And you know what's happened before in the festivals? Not a lot, but with independent films, sometimes this will not happen to us. This is not me alluding to any secret behind the scenes deal, dear listener. This is just, wouldn't it be cool if a film can get bought at that level and then remade before it's released?
Like they like the idea, but
your
they want to
idea
do
is
it.
good enough,
Yeah.
but why don't you actually make it for real?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's happened with a number of well done shorts that got turned into features.
It used to be the normal path. Now it's not so much.
Yeah. Apparently It Follows wasn't reshot, but once it was purchased, there was a bunch of production notes that were like, if you do these things, then this is the deal for the film.
Such a great film.
And it's such a great film. And those notes are clearly wonderful because that film is still terrifying. And I know how it ends, how it starts. I know everything about it. And it's still just pervasive dread. Have you seen It Follows? Yeah.
I think the other thing that's in the background of Princess and Dragon, though, for me is I think there's a lot of the eye collector in that film, thematically speaking. And that speech that Storybook gives in the film, it's almost rewriting part of a speech in the eye collector.
Don't you find as writers, we're always rewriting the same stories of our hearts?
Yeah, but I just think like to me, there's always that way that like a project will flow out of another project. So like it flows out, to me, the Princess Dragon, it flows out of the Minus Institute in fairly obvious ways. It flows out of, the eye collector in a certain thematic sense. It flows out of some of the things that Miles and Eric were really, always wanted to do, or were probably some of their earlier projects. I'm sure you could find some of the seeds of it too. There's always that kind of way you're influenced by other things, but also you're kind of almost influenced by the stuff you were doing previous to this, and either you're trying to replicate certain things that you liked, or you're trying to get away from things, there's always that sort of back and forth dynamic.
And to speak to your comment about it being, very GMB focused, I did weekly or bi-weekly for this entire year, communicate with Miles, see the edit, see it shaped, a number of the illustrative elements that got sort of they're like superimposed onto it. This was us trying to find a solution together that the production could afford, i.e. we would just do it ourselves. to cover up failings in a missed shot, a missed transition, a lack of impact in the frame, these kinds of things, to just try and find a way to make it interesting and more of what we were claiming it was.
And I think, maybe it started that way a little bit, but it started to become more its own thing and more like a value add in terms of some of the thematic ideas. And to me, it really started emphasizing some of the, imminent ideas in the book, like all that stuff that storybook talks about. It then starts to get thematically set up and played out in the way that it's shot. So those sort of animation overlay aspects to me started to really work.
I liked them. I thought they were good. At times it felt a little Lynchian.
It was Miles' idea originally.
I'll take that.
And I remember him explaining this idea to us, and I was like, I like the ideas that it's weird. And I don't know if it'll work. Like I was kind of like 90% sold on it, but not 100%. And then I would see versions of it, and I was like, I just don't know if it's really working. But then by the time this version came, I feel like it works in that version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it a blockbuster film? No. Is it a incredible achievement at the budget line? Undeniably. And I'm very proud that we stuck it through to finish.
Now, the budget, by the way, the budget also included money to pay you guys, right?
No,
we have now back in. We, in fact, exchanged money up front to take a producer side on the other end. Because if they had bought it outright, we'd have no...
He doesn't mean exchange.
Right.
He means eschewed.
Yeah,
right.
Eschewed,
yeah. So we didn't exchange money up front.
Yeah.
I'll get to wrap it up because I got to get going.
Okay,
Any final
so
thoughts?
Yes, I do have a final thought. But now that I'm put on the spot for my final thought, it just disappeared. All right, dear listener, if you are trying to get your idea out into the world, I think one of the things that this conversation should probably elucidate for you is that it isn't a clear path. What you think is the end and what you think is the beginning isn't the important place to start. But make sure that you put one effort after the other in order to try it. And when it all falls apart and you're looking at the edit and you're saying, there's no movie here, there's just another 9 months of work. That's
something you said. It's
we said.
Well, 9 months later, we shot more. We went another day of shooting, which is, frankly,
it's not that long, but
it was almost 9 months because it was January to October.
That's not when we did our other shoot.
Yeah, I could just looked it up on my phone because I got photo stamps, right? It's in October.
That's crazy. Doesn't seem like that. Yeah, we did a day of pickups. But that's for another episode of Super Pulp Science. Dear listener, I've lost my train of thought and my delightfully closing speech was derailed by Jonathan's careful edit, which is really how it should be. This is GMV Kimijak encouraging you all to join the fight and make comments.